Welcome to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. And of course, as you know, we call what we represent here Jesus' greatest act of defiance, because by dying on the cross, he stood in defiance of the powers that sought the destruction of humanity, and that is represented by our new logo. So the logo, I guess I use the term logo, it's not really a logo, but our new image, which you can find on the podcast. And so that's what we're all about here. Now, remember what we talked about last week, and we'll do a consecration in a little while, but let me first talk about what we did last week. Remember, everything was setting the stage for this week. Last week, we talked about Jacob changing his name to Struggles with God. We knew what Struggles with God were all about, that is something that is not uncommon in those who are seeking to follow Christ, that there are these struggles, that this is a reality, the struggles in your daily life, struggles, and that whole idea that you turn around and say, yeah, I always thought that if I came to follow the Lord, life would be all kinds of wonderful. And doesn't it drive you crazy when you deal with people who say, my life has been wonderful ever since I came to follow the Lord? Oh, isn't that interesting? I'm saying I'm very happy I'm following the Lord, but has my life been perfect or wonderful? Or has it been just one great big circus? No. You got to remember that. So, and why that's important is if you're trying to be faithful to the Lord and things go wrong, you go, well, what's wrong with me? The things went wrong. Oh, remember, what is the original meaning of the word Israel? Struggles with God. If you are going to follow the Lord, you're going to find yourself in struggles with God. And we talked that last week. But don't forget what else we brought to the fore was everything last week laid down the foundation of what we're going to look at this week and this week and next week. And that is the powerful story of the Exodus. And in fact, today on the 14th of July, isn't this Bastille Day? Yeah, it's Bastille Day. On the 14th of July, this is exactly where we're beginning the Exodus. Now, keep in mind, we can just go into the Bible and we can say, well, there's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, start naming names, Jeremiah, Hosea. If you're going to give me homework of reading a part of the Bible, please let it be the letter of Jude, because it's the shortest book in the Bible. You can get all that. You can know that part. But what we're actually talking about, what we saw last week, is the whole focus. Everything in the Old Testament is focused on this, what we are going to look into in the next 2 weeks, the story of the Exodus. And then it focuses on Christ. So if you were to think of this in two ways, you have the foundation, and then you have the first floor. So the foundation is what you see in the other parts of Genesis. Then you have the first floor, which is Moses, and then the second floor, which is Jesus. That's what we're looking at. So the foundation was laid last week when you had Jacob, also known as Israel, going to encounter his son in Egypt, who he hadn't met in a long time because his sons just happened to sell him in slavery. Imagine what that conversation might have been like. Why are we missing one of our sons? Well, we kind of we didn't mean to, but we kind of sold him into slavery. You what? That discussion, pardon my cough, that discussion is not in the Bible, but there must have been some kind of a you what? Kind of reminds you that great line from Young Frankenstein. What was the name of that brain? Abby something. Abby Normal. It's that. Well, yeah, we're missing us. Oh, okay, yeah. Joseph. Yeah, Joseph. Yeah, he went with us, and he didn't come back with us because we Well, we accidentally sold him into slavery. Can you imagine what that must have been like? Well, anyway, as we explained last week, the Lord does powerful things even through our great mistakes, and we saw that. And the Lord tells Jacob, go to Egypt because I'm going to do great powerful things through this, but we're going to see yet again disastrous things happen. And this comes into one of the powerful realities we see. This is just so powerful. And one of the things we want to look at, this is important. Be careful of reading the Bible as if it's a holy book. I might say, well, Father, that doesn't make any sense. It is a holy book. I wrote one of the first stories I ever wrote. Maybe I should even dramatize it, but I can't. Was a story about a king. Well, it's a long story, but a king who tries to get people to read a holy book written by God, long story, to bring peace to his kingdom. And the people get all upset because one of the places he tells them to read the holy book written by God is the bathroom, because read it in all the rooms. And they go all upset, and they consider it blasphemy to read the holy book written by God in the bathroom. There's a little story behind that. And so they almost come to a riot until this man comes along and says the blasphemy is not to read the holy book written by God in the bathroom. The real blasphemy is not to read it at all. You understand? So that was my story. It's actually a lot longer than that. And this is one of the things. We can look at that as this very inhuman, or, just lose the humanity of it. A holy book written by God that we must treat in such a way we miss the humanity. But we see the humanity here. And the more we see what's going on in our world, the more we see the humanity. Before we continue, let's do a consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that you glorify your name through us. We ask that we may understand the humanity you gave to us, and that we may live in that humanity, and we may glorify your name. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. So, what's going on here? Well, now the Jews were established Hebrews. Now, people have written to me and said this is very confusing for them. They're not called Jews yet. They won't be called Jews until long after King David. And the reason is because the term Jew comes from the nation of Judea, which won't exist until roughly around the 8th century BC. And we are the 8th century BC, and we are far from that. So that's where the term Jew comes from. It comes from the term Judea, which doesn't exist yet. We're now focused on Israel. So in any case, and even though we have Jacob name Israel, they're all called the Hebrews. Even in some areas, they're called the Hebrews because they're speaking Hebrew. They are a Hebrew nation. They're not living on the land that the Lord gave to them, and so they're called Hebrews. So they're all the same people. We use different names. So depending on what time, what epoch we are talking about. So in any case, here they are, the Hebrews, and everything's going fine, and then this may sound familiar. All of a sudden, this new, in the case of the book in the Bible, this new king comes into place, and he said, I don't know about these Hebrews here. We're Egyptians, and they're Hebrews. I don't know. Something could go wrong, and then what are we going to do? So they start to oppress the Hebrews, and they start to enslave them and use them as slaves. This becomes an interesting thing because notice that they became afraid of this foreign nationals, these foreign nationals among them, and then decide they are going to make sure that those foreign nationals will never turn against them, which essentially they don't, only because of the power of the Lord. But do you understand how there is elements of that that are very familiar today? And nothing says, by the way, the Hebrews were ever going to turn on the Egyptians. Nothing ever says that. But you see how things kind of sound very familiar. And let me tell you what that means. It means, again, look at the humanity behind the scenes. And the humanity behind the scenes makes it clear that the humanity is a constant. This kind of stuff happens all the time because the humanity is there, not so much because it's written in the Bible. And the Bible is based on the human reaction. The human reaction is not based on the Bible. So here we have a very real situation that happened in the time of the Exodus that is very similar to what is going on in this country today in regards to immigrants. And and again, how does it happen? Well, how does it happen? We can see it happen all the time. So do you see that? And this, now granted, the Egyptians were even stricter than the Americans in this. Notice that, because what do? They declare that all male children must be eliminated. They must be removed. Something similar to that happened in China, but it was the opposite. It was, I think it was female. I think it was very hard to keep a female, because they had the one-child policy, and the preference was for a male, not a female. So very, very similar structure. So again, this humanity is behind the scenes. And what's going to happen? The mothers and the fathers are going to act always as mothers and fathers. And one of the problems we have in our scientific world is that people put together science, and nothing wrong with science, but they forget to bring in the humanity. And what is the Bible showing? The humanity precedes the message of God. Humanity begins there. Humans tend to leave out the humanity. We're going to be right back. On the other side of the break, we'll be right back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. So anyway, we're talking about this very first chapter of Exodus, and here it is. The decree goes out from the Pharaoh that the male children must be eliminated. Remember, I don't know if any of you remember the old Irwin Allen programs, but he was great at special effects. Sometimes the writing was a little bit out there. So I still remember, whenever they would, especially the Time Tunnel or some of them, they would just have these characters show up. It was usually the guy who played Kowalski on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And he was in all the Irwin Allen shows. And he would, like one time he played in Martian, and if you don't do what I say, you will be liquidated. Because he used all these words to describe what would happen if you didn't follow him, which was in simple language, you'd be eliminated. I'll put it that way. I'm not even using it, but they used all these words. Well, here you have this message goes out: the elimination of male Hebrew children. And here's the thing. Again, what am I talking about? There's humanity in the background. Mothers are different. You want to see a good example of this? Let's look at a great example of this. When COVID happened, take a lesson from everything that happens. COVID happens. And they go, all these restrictions go out and everything else. And people, of course, as I said, would happen. Those people who obeyed and did that's fine. But now they have a real power to stand up and said, we've done it once. It's not going to happen again. And we want to hold those who made this happen. And if it shouldn't have happened, then we want to hold them accountable. But you see what they did. That was one of the things. Go see the way this works and then go from there. And notice what happens. That humanity comes out. And with that humanity coming out, some of the craziest things happen. The humanity says no, or they found ways around it, or everything else. But there were some that took it the wrong way, and they would react against it in a way that they lost every single time. You know, one of the things I was shocked, and I was surprised they didn't do this in California, but California, California tends to be more, people don't realize that. They think it's a very rebellious state. It's not. So one of the greatest ways, if they wanted to protest, and I was shocked they didn't, was when they did the recall against Gavin Newsom during that time. Just wear the mask and make sure on the mask it says recall Gavin Newsom. That's how you protest, because then you're following along what you're supposed to be doing in a way that would get them to say, please stop doing that. And that's what you want to do. In any case, these are the rules that are going out in the Exodus. The male children must be eliminated. But humanity gets involved, and the mother of Moses makes sure that he survives, and the Holy Spirit as well has him rescued by the Pharaoh's family. I think the Pharaoh's mother or the Pharaoh's wife? I should know that. It should be right in front of me. It isn't. Let me look that up. Because you know what? I have everything in front of me, but what do I have in my memory was the Ten Commandments. And if you remember in the Ten Commandments, you're trying to distinguish which one's the mother, which one's the wife. That was very that. So this happens that Moses is saved by the Pharaoh's family. And so we're seeing that. So we're seeing all this change happen. And what is the cause of it? What I said, humanity. This is the powerful truth of our faith. And this is why so many people who do nothing but recite rules don't get it. And this is why they cause great division. They cause great problems, because what do? Well, the rule is it's a form of fundamentalism. And I'm not going to mention names of organizations, but it's a form of fundamentalism, because what are they doing? They're saying, well, the church teaches X, Y, and Z, and therefore you have to follow X, Y, and Z. And someone says, well, it says right here. Yeah, but it also says over here that, and you have these arguments go back and forth. None of them, they're all based in what the texts say. None of them consider the humanity. And it's the humanity that draws everything out. And what everything is about is helping the humanity be informed by the wisdom of God. But what's important to understand is that means the humanity is informed by the wisdom of God. The humanity is rooted in the wisdom of God by choosing God as the source of wisdom. And in doing so, they bring their humanity, or we bring our humanity into the wisdom of God, not separate our humanity from its roots. Do you see the difference? This is why understanding the humanity of the Old Testament and the humanity of all this is so important. And this is what people don't do. So if you're watching the internet, I mean, and what's happening is you'll have some priest, oh, he's a priest, he should know better. Therefore, I'm going to listen to what he says because he's a priest. No, he's the guy who is maybe a priest, celebrates Mass, some sacraments are valid. You go to him for confession, which I wouldn't recommend. You go to him for confession, sacraments are valid, but what is he teaching? I'm talking about some certain specific priest. He's teaching fundamentalism, and he's teaching things that he tells you you're supposed to believe X, Y, and Z without taking into account your humanity. There's a priest out there that is teaching people they have to believe that the devils want them to believe in evolution. There is no such thing as evolution. The devils, this is what the priest is teaching. It's certainly not what I teach. And the devils want them to believe in evolution. Why is he saying that? That is not Catholic teaching. Why is he saying that? Because he is removing an element of who we truly are from his teaching. And you want to be careful of that. Anytime you see someone just sitting there pontificating and telling X, Y, and Z without taking into account the humanity, you're dealing with someone who is focusing on a biblical reality without the human factor. And you're going to watch this happening every time. So in today's reading, I get a little ahead of myself, and we still have some time here. In today's reading, what is the human factor? The human factor is that people are afraid that the Hebrews will outnumber them. Therefore, we must oppress them now so that they will never oppress us. Is anything written anywhere that the Hebrews will oppress anyone? It's kind of like, I don't know if you know this, and maybe this is one of those things I shouldn't say in a public forum, but I will. Well, during COVID, a lot of people were talking about hydroxychloroquine. I never took it. I'm not about to take it, and the whole bit. That's between you and your doctor. Because there is something very similar to it, as I believe. And there is this drug called, I think it's called chloroquine. And what they would do is they'd give it to you as a protector against malaria. And whatever drug it was, I can't remember exactly the drug, but it was this drug that you were supposed to take while you were in malaria-prone areas of South America. This is when I went to Ecuador. So, and the problem is it had a side effect, because you have to read the side effects. The side effect is you could go blind and deaf. I said, I'd rather have malaria. I literally said that. I said, I'd rather have malaria. So thank you very much. I have no intention for preventing myself from getting malaria, of going blind and deaf. And they said, no, that's a very rare case. No, it's a rare case, but I don't know I'm one of the rare people who could get it. You understand? So I said, no, I'm not taking this stuff. And when I got to South America, the missionaries there said, don't take it. And one of the missionaries who told me not to take it got malaria. He got malaria. He had been there for years, but he got malaria. And he recovered from malaria. He lived a long time after that. He recently died in his, I think, late 70s, early 80s, somewhere in that vicinity. And he did very well. But you see what I'm saying? That protection, when they told me that, this is good for you, but no, thank you, but I'd rather have malaria. Thank you very much. And you might say, well, you wouldn't want malaria. Well, I wouldn't want to go blind and deaf either. The best choice is not to have either one, but if I have to choose one over the other, I'm going to choose the malaria. So this is what the Egyptians do. It's like, as you look at this, as we have to oppress the Hebrews because the Hebrews may outnumber us and take over. Well, there's nothing there that says that was ever going to happen. Nothing. So the new king is what they describe in today's reading. The new king decides, well, we're going to take over and we're going to press them to make sure that this doesn't happen. but nothing said it was going to happen in the first place. Do you understand? Sometimes that preventative stuff, and then preventative stuff is important, but sometimes it can go very, very far and a little too far. And I happen to be one of those people who was trained to think always in worst case scenarios. And unfortunately, when you always think that, then you always think you're going to end up, the worst case can happen. And then you deal with people who go, what? What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. And let me give you an example. So when I was in Ecuador, of course, now I'm not taking the malaria medicine, although we did meet people who had malaria. But the problem, the big disease of the time was cholera. And you get cholera from basically infected water. So the people used to wash their clothes in the river. They used to go to the bathroom in the river. And the government came out and said, tell people not to swim or wash their clothes in the river. And the people said, we've been washing our clothes and swimming in this river for thousands of years. You're not going to tell us anything. But you could get cholera. And their whole reaction was, but I might not get cholera. And that's the way I'm going to focus. And it was just this very similar to the COVID issue, very big battle that happened left and right. The problem with cholera is it's an extremely treatable disease. Actually, I think it's just an IV called a suero. They just give someone a suero. The problem was it's treatable in 4 hours. In other words, if you get cholera, you have 4 hours to get treated. And that was one of the problems with cholera. Very treatable, not a problem. It's very treatable as long as you're treated within 4 hours. Many of the people there only had horses. They didn't have cars. And so that was an issue. But again, you try to convince them and they're going, no, we've been doing this for 1,000 years. You can't tell us. No, we'll be right back. On the other side of the break, you're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. Well, so we're beginning this first day of, I think it's about 2-3 weeks, talking about the Exodus. So we begin with the oppression of the Hebrews. And it all starts with, we have to be afraid, be very afraid. And you have to go, why? But that's what people said. They could turn against us. Are you kidding me? You really think that's going to happen? And personally, I don't think it ever would have happened. That's a reality. So in any case, this is what happens, and that's that whole. So always kind of think about that. Always be aware of, as I've been trained to think, the worst case scenario. Yeah, but this could happen. Yeah, but it might not happen. Do you better watch out. You could, all of a sudden find yourself, it's kind of like, people will say you're walking down the street and someone could attack you. How many times you walk down the street and no one's ever attacked you? Do you ever think of that? I have this new thing that I'm a hospital chaplain now. As you know, I was pastor over at St. Anthony in Alston, which you should visit if you were in the area. But I'm now a hospital chaplain. I can say now, if anyone gives me a hard time, next time you see me, you'll be in the hospital. Oh, really? And what are you going to do? I'm just telling you, the next time you see me, you'll be in the hospital. Oh, really? And what are you going to do? Well, I'm not going to do anything. I just happen to work in the hospital. Anyway. So we will be back tomorrow. We're going to be focusing on this whole story, which is now setting the stage for the entire Exodus event. And the whole story, which eventually give rise to Moses, eventually give rise to the Ten Commandments, and because this is the central event in the Old Testament, leading us right to the central event in our history of the world, which is Christ.